I trust everyone had a great Saturday, Sunday. I went hiking in Canmore on Saturday. Never hike on the weekend. I never do, except for I had some friends, and that was the only day they could go. But oh my gosh, the trail, it was just like constant traffic. But so great to be in the mountains, breathing in amazing mountain air. Hi, Brian from Manitoba. Hi, Esther, Dylan, Susie, Susan, Calgary. So before I introduce our amazing guest this evening, I would like to share a sovereign power affirmation. Well, it's a few affirmations. I have no idea who wrote it. Whoever did is brilliant, I must say. I thank them. It's really about taking your power back and reclaiming your sovereignty. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read it out loud, and then I just invite you to listen and make these words your own. So everyone just take a moment to close your eyes. Bring in a big, deep breath of life force energy. Okay, another deep breath in. Just keeping your eyes closed, focusing on your breath. And just while I share this, again, keeping your eyes closed and owning these words. I now call all my life force energy back to me from every person, place, entity, from every space, time, portal, and dimension, from every connection, attachment, and vessel where I left it, from anyone who's attempting to siphon my energy. You do not have consent to use my vitality. I call my power back. I unhook from the need for others to see me in a certain way at this time. I am no longer energetically, emotionally, or mentally available to assume what others are thinking, needing, or feeling, and trust them as capable to feel their feelings and own their needs. Take in a deep breath, keep your eyes closed. I now release that which is not my own. I lay down the weight that does not belong to me. I forgive all things and all people. I'm harnessing my inner strength and turning my dreams into reality by believing in myself and my innate abilities. I am thankful for the abundance and positive energy that fills my days. I visualize all good things I desire and welcome them into my life effortlessly. I know I will receive. Keep focusing on your breath, breathing in, keeping your eyes closed. I harness the power of love to protect me from anything that is not loving. Anytime I lose my way or forget what really matters, I summon love to remind me of my own strength. Love is the way I walk in truth. I trust that I am sovereign over my experience, and in doing so, accept full responsibility to honor myself, my vision, and my body's needs. I'm a light bringer, and I speak in the name of love. I do not waver in the face of fear because I know what I'm here to give. I don't need to fight when I know that peace is who I am. Keep focusing on your breath, breathing deeply, keeping your eyes closed. I no longer dance the dance of people-pleasing, placating, or niceties. My energy, my body, my emotions, my boundaries, my joy, my healing, my choices. All of it is my responsibility, and I accept this responsibility with reverence. That said, I will remain kind in all my interactions with others, even if they do not believe as I do. I trust myself with my fullness. I trust that others are capable of healing without my rescuing, tending, or saving. I trust my own capacity to feel my discomfort when others are having stressful experiences, projections, or want me to give more than I can. Keep breathing deeply. Keeping your eyes closed. Breathing in these words. I trust my sovereignty to choose who, what, and how to use my energy in this time. I trust myself to make bold choices with what I hear as I tune in. I trust myself to recover when I get it wrong. I now make the sovereign choice to believe that it is safe to be in my fullness and shine my light, and for others to be in theirs. This is my freedom. And so it is. Take another deep breath in. And you can open your eyes. When you are ready, I would love to hear how you feel from those words. Love to hear in the chat. Excellent, Peter. Empowered, full of freedom. Yay. Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Rusty. That was beautiful. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Karen. Beautiful. Yes, we all need to stand in our power more than ever as we see, especially if you've tuned into the Olympics. I do not have a TV, but I'm just seeing some excerpts of some people posting videos, especially the horsemen, all the symbolism. We truly need to stand in our sovereignty, in our power. And as we all know, love is our superpower. Karen, do we know if Dr. Rima's here yet?
I haven't seen her yet. I see that Elsa is on. Maybe Elsa, you can unmute.
Okay, so if you'd like me to say a few words about Rima, I can. Rima is a psychiatrist in her 80s. So what's she doing caring about the United Nations? She and her second husband were became incredibly aware of the dangers. And so many people focus on other things, particularly these days we're hearing about who. But for her, it's like she says, a pimple on the ass of the United Nations. In other words, just look at my hands, even if it's not a pimple, even if it's a finger, if you cut off the finger and you leave the hand, you still have four other fingers, and the United Nations can set up a new thing at any time. So both she and her husband, who died a number of years ago, was poisoned, had the conviction that it has to be the United Nations, and that we should be putting our energy. This is particularly important in the United States, as Rima will let you know, because they have a chance to get the US to leave the UN, to pull out. Right now, 24 states are indicating they want out. Why? This would be a way to collapse the UN. Most of you, or all of you, know about the banking cartels and the Vatican cartel and all of these cartels. But how are they going to act, and how will we stop them? Where is there an intersection point?
Thank you, Elsa, for being here. And thank you for introducing us to Rima as well. Welcome, Rima. Welcome to
Thank
Life
you.
First Canada.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm really honored. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I did send out an email to our members today, letting them know that you're going to be sharing an intense conviction conversation as well, and that getting out of the UN is a ultra high priority. So I'm glad you're here, and we would just really love to hear your story on how you got involved in everything that you do today.
Sure. First of all, let me tell you that the single most important website in the entire universe is preventgenocide2030.org. Preventgenocide2030.org. Unless, of course, you're a big fan of genocide, in which case it's not such such an important site. And surprisingly and terrifyingly, there are a lot of people who are very much in favor of genocide, who have decided that they have the right to decide who has the right to a license to be on the planet and who doesn't. And they have all kinds of stories that they've made up about why that might be, for climate change or improvement of the race, or, oh, the usual stuff. My my mother taught me that genocide is rude, and I continue to believe that genocide is rude. How did I get involved in this? I'm wired. I'm a physician. I was graduated from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York in 1970, which I am happy to say is still within living memory. And I went to medical school in order to become a psychiatrist because I come from a truly, truly crazy family of origin. And I had to find some way of figuring out what was right and what was wrong and what was real. So, in the process of that difficult but very valuable um, uh, eh, growing up time, where I learned that the most important thing to me in the world is knowing what's true and then following it, I developed a hair trigger bullshit meter. Boing! As soon as I hear bullshit, my bullshit meter goes full tilt. So the other thing about me is that I'm wired for social justice. I can't leave well enough alone if it isn't well enough to in the way that it could be. So I've been involved in all kinds of movements. I'm 80 years old, and I got kicked out of my first social justice oriented organization for wrong think when I was just shy of 14. So I've been doing this for a long time. And I want to tell you that I have never seen a movement as penetrated, as controlled, and as deviated from its real purpose as the health freedom movement. And what that tells me is that this is the real deal. This is the most important issue on the planet. Who owns your body? Who has the right to make decisions about what happens to your body, what goes into it, what must, what may not go into your body, who owns the very genetic matrix of your body, and who decides whether you live or die. To those people who are making those decisions, and let us agree never again to call them the elite. They're not elite. They're rich. They have fancy clothes. They have airplanes and very shiny shoes, and they are scum. They are not even pond scum, because pond scum has a place in the ecology. These people have no place. They are scum. The elite are you. The elite are the people who are spending their heart's energy and their time and their focus and their care and their creativity on making things right. That's what we are, all of us. Whether we're rich, whether we're poor, it doesn't matter. We are the compassionate people who are working to make humanity safe from the scum, who are pretty mean, pretty nasty, pretty awful. So I came equipped, if you will, with this long history of being involved in the push for integration and civil rights, and being involved in uh, patient rights, and being involved in anti-war movements and all that kind of stuff. And I have, from the day I graduated from medical school, I have practiced drug-free medicine and psychiatry. Now, in my view, pharmaceuticals have a place in the emergency room, in the surgical suite, and in the ICU. Other than that, having treated some of the most cataclysmically ill people in the world, I don't see any purpose for them, except for making money and making sure that you need more of them. So it's a great business model. So I was running a private practice of drug-free medicine and psychiatry in New York. I had an office in Manhattan and an office in suburban New York, just outside of Manhattan. And that was very interesting. I was using nutrition and detoxification and frequency medicine and neurobiofeedback and psychotherapy and homeopathy and this and that and the other thing, and it was working pretty well. So people who are desperate have desperate friends and or relatives or whatever, and so people were coming to my offices from around the world, the rich and famous, the rich and not famous, the ordinary men and women of the world. They Lots of different people were coming to my office. One of the people who came to my office was a head of state, and she had some physical problems that hadn't been treated by all the fancy doctors and institutions that she had gone to. So she came to me, and I was able to help her not have that physical problem anymore. Well, one day she she was a nice chatty lady, and she did not wear her tiara to my office, by the way. So one day she said to me, it's almost time for the great culling to begin. And I said, the what? And she said, culling, C-U-L-L. I said, I know the word. What are you talking about? And she explained to me very simply in words of one syllable, because clearly I was not tracking very well, that the culling of the useless eaters was about to begin. And that was a culling of 90% of the world's population. And I challenged her on this, and I asked this is one of the wealthiest people in the world. And I said, how are you going to maintain your enormous wealth if you don't have vast numbers of people to sell huge amounts of shit to? And she said, the mercantile era, which began in the 14th century with the Hanseatic League in Germany, is coming to an end. We are moving to the neo-feudal era. There will be us, the neo-aristocrats at the top, surrounded by our servants and servitors, which, by the way, was the first time I'd ever heard anyone use the word servitor in a sentence. Surrounded by our servants and servitors, and around them our technicians, and that requires only about 10% of the current world population. When she left, and I thought to myself, either this woman is batshit crazy, and I missed it because I was treating a physical ailment and wasn't doing a mental assessment, or she's given me a great clue. Well, of course, the answer was both, because she was a psychopath, is a psychopath, and had been raised to be a psychopath. And as you know, a psychopath is a person who has no connection with anything or agency or organization or kith nor kin nor chick nor child, except what they perceive as being to their own personal well-being. So there is no ability to love. They behave differently, but in fact, internally, they are totally without love. You may say, well, are they fully human? That's a very interesting philosophical question, but they sure are good at fooling other people who don't see them. So and somebody said I missed who. I will not identify this person. Reprehensible as she still is entitled to medical privacy, both ethically and by law. So no, I will not identify who she is. Anyway, she's a monarch. Anyway, the point is, I started on a quest to find out what this useless eater business was about. And what I discovered was that, oh, by the way, this was in probably late 2002 or maybe early 2003. And I discovered that useless eater was a term of art in Germany before there was a Nazi Germany. And that through the Action 4 program, German children, then German adolescents, then German adults, then German citizens of every age, were being exterminated if they were imperfect. Now, parenthesis, how did eugenics get to Germany? Eugenics was introduced, some of you may already know, into Germany by John D. Rockefeller Sr. and John D. Rockefeller Jr. They set up and funded the Kaiser Wilhelm Institutes in Munich and Berlin. Clearly, this was before Adolf Hitler because they were the Kaiser Wilhelm Institutes. John D. Rockefeller Sr. was the wealthiest man the world had ever seen. He was the world's first billionaire, and he was a visionary. He was a bad dude, but he was a visionary bad dude. And he said, hey, you know what? I am almost infinitely wealthy, and I can remake the world. I can use my vast wealth more than any other human being on the planet has ever accumulated, including, the Emperor of China, for God's sakes. I can use my wealth to remake society, but I'll have to be clever. What I'll have to do is take over and mold and shape every single aspect of society: education, medicine, governance, law, transportation, public health. By the way, the entire pseudoscience of public health was created as part of this long game for world domination. That's interesting. Every single science. I have to take over science because we have to develop the science to modify, control, and own every human being on the planet. And as long as we're doing human beings, why don't we take over everything? We're rich. We, the philanthropists, the predatory philanthropists, whom I call for shorthand the Rockefellerians, and John Jacob Astor and the Vanderbilts and Carnegie. Now today, of course, it's George Soros and Bill Gates and Hillary and Bill Clinton and so on, and Bezos and Zuckerberg and so on. The mega wealthy, and they get mega-er and mega-er as money loses its value through intentional inflation. And he said, let's get a whole bunch of people together who are wealthy and therefore entitled to make all the decisions about who lives and who dies and under what conditions. And let's do this. Now, all of you, I am sure, know about the medical capture by the Rockefellerians. This is no longer news. Do you know that the same capture was going on with the Laura Spelman Memorial Fund of Governance? The Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, the Schools of Foreign Relations were set up to create the elite tier, and then the ordinary tier, and then the worker bees for taking over world governance. And indeed, that part was so successful that in 1992, every single country in the world signed on at the Rio summit to Agenda 21, because the entire governing class, like the entire medical class, like the entire legal class, like the entire public health class, etc., like the entire education class, had been propagandized and owned to the point where they could be brought into a delusion that said, we need to destroy our countries in order to take care of our countries, which is what Agenda 21 says. Now, how did we get there? The World Health Organization is a Rockefellerian product of long-term planning. I've lectured about this and I've written about this, but we don't have time to go into the details. The United Nations is a Rockefellerian long-term, long-planned world control system that has been incredibly beautifully funded and propagandized up the wazoo in every language in the world, all over the world, creating these monsters, these death machine units, clothed in robes of beauty and humanitarian kindness. There is nothing humanitarian about these institutions. They are designed for depopulation, and they are designed for the absolute total degradation of the human species, starting from the DNA outward. They have not been ready until the science was ready, and so they paid for the science. This is a eugenics system, no matter what the propaganda is, and we can go into the details of how this was done and what that's about. Now, they're almost ready to spring the trap completely. Several years ago, I was working very hard and I was combining my efforts with James Roguski, whom I'm sure you all know, a wonderful, genuinely brilliant researcher and communicator. And we were working very, very, very hard to carry out a political gradualism globally so that we believed that we could get countries out of the World Health Organization and then take the momentum that we had gained thereby. And by the way, I believe the correct name for that organization is the World Holocaust Organization. From the moment that it was conceived by the Rockefellerians back in the 19 teens, it was intended to reduce the world's population and to enslave the world's population as part of what later became the United Nations. It was supposed to be the League of Nations, but the United States, and this is critically important, the United States refused to join the League of Nations. And then the League of Nations was allowed to collapse. When later, after they had had another war, and by the way, throughout, before, during, and after the Second World War, in which allegedly the United States and Germany were enemies. Remember that part? And Canada and Germany were enemies. The Rockefellerians, specifically the Rockefeller Fund Family University, Cold Spring Harbor, were supporting 3,500 eugenics scientists in Germany before the Second World War, during the Second World War, and after the Second War. And these poor murderous babies couldn't get jobs because they were clearly Nazis, and that was sort of hard on you after the Second World War was concluded. So generously, those who were not brought to the United States on Operation Paperclip were brought to the United States by the Rockefeller Institute Foundation, by their money system, under the Displaced Scholars Program, and 3,500 eugenics monsters were seeded into the New School and the University of Chicago and Cold Spring Harbor and one university after another, all over the United States to work their damage. You can thank them for fluoride, but that's another lecture. Now, moving right along, we have eugenic people who are committed to eugenics, who have pretty much more money than God, and who have all the time in the world. So for 140 years, they've been stimulating the science to get to the point where they could destroy humanity from the DNA outward, the jab, the bioweapon, the gene therapy. And we can talk about the patent implications of your altered genes. That's another very interesting issue. And we saw them capture every single institution of humanity, every single one. Banking is just one. Name an institution which humanity depends upon for organization, connection, and function. And it has been intentionally captured, not only in the United States and Canada, but worldwide by these brilliant, patient monsters, which is what they are, which is why I say, please don't call them elite. That's not appropriate. They are scum. Now, they have gotten to the point where they believe they're ready to spring the trap. So after working on trying to get as many countries as possible out of the World Holocaust Organization, which has a clear and explicit program of world depopulation, by the way. I came across something a little under a year ago. I wandered into a piece of information that I was unaware of. There are actually things that all of us are unaware of. I was unaware of something called Pact for the Future. I was unaware of something called Summit for the Future. And Pact for the Future is the complete and total apotheosis of world control without any exit ramp by the United Nations, which is a death machine. Pact for the Future is due to be adopted by the General Assembly that of the unelected nobodies, also known as the UN. And let me stop here for a moment and tell you that the unelected nobodies, the United Nations, is an organization which your country and my country and every other country in the world is connected to by fraud, is connected to by fraud. Most people believe, most people in governance, most legislators and prime ministers and presidents and kings for life and whatever they are, heads of state and the people who comprise the operational apparatus of any state believe that their country, whether it's Romania or Russia or Canada or Vanuatu or the United States, has treaties with the United Nations. How many of you here put your hands up if you believe that there are treaty obligations between Canada and the United Nations? Lots of people, right? Well, there aren't. A treaty, according to international law, treaty is an agreement between two equally sovereign states, even if both of them are corporations, doesn't matter, between sovereign states that they will make their laws match on a particular issue. Maybe it's a tariff issue. Maybe it's a migration issue. Maybe it's migratory birds and whether they can be shot for game purposes. As you know, the US and Canada have a treaty about migratory birds, as a matter of fact. Go figure. A treaty can only be concluded between two sovereign states. If one of those entities, or multiple sovereign states, you could have a multilateral treaty with 27 different countries or 194 countries signing on to it. Okay, but they're sovereign countries. If one of those entities is a corporation or a club, like, for instance, a country club, a club of countries, which is all that the United Nations is. If it's a club or a corporation, what a sovereign nation and that entity can have is a contract. but a contract has no capacity and no weight to make a country change its laws. That contract must be within the laws that already exist in the country. And when the contract terms are been concluded or the product has been delivered or whatever, the contract's over. The United Nations is not a country. It is a club, a private club. And according to the Vienna Conference on the Law of Treaties, which is the international law statement of what a treaty is, concluded in 1969 and 1971 by the countries of the United Nations and followed by the United States and Canada, according to the Vienna Conference on the Law of Treaties, there is no treaty obligation between anything other than sovereign entities. Therefore, everything that Canada is doing, because the United Nations says it has to do it, because we've got treaties, every compliance by my country or your country or any other country with the United Nations is based on fraud. Now, in the United States, one of the most important things in the world is currently happening. Remember, Pact for the Future is about to be adopted by the unelected nobodies on September 23rd at the Summit for the Future, where the United Nations has styled itself, I kid you not, you can go online and look this up, as United Nations 2.0. Look up United Nations 2.0. United Nations 2.0 has said, you know, the world has a lot of problems. Oh, there's so many problems. We've got agricultural problems, which we created by shutting down farming. We've got environmental problems, which we created by lying about climate change and telling people that they had it. We've got pandemic problems, which we lied about. By the way, we never had a pandemic. You know that we had a propagandemic, and the death and damage came from the iatrogenic, the doctor-delivered harm of the medical procedures, the withholding of medical procedures, and most importantly, the bioweapon distribution. We understand that. So these problems are so serious that we, the unelected nobodies of the world, must solve the problems for the world. How do we do that? We take control. We take control. We set up a council of elders, people who have been heads of state, i.e., have already been vetted and allowed to survive by the World Economic Forum, okay, which has formal organizational ties and agreements with the United Nations. And it true is a private club of nobodies. We will set up a council of elders, and then we'll just decide what to do for the entire world. And we will destroy property rights, and we will destroy family rights and parental rights, and we will destroy families and religions and culture and, you know, the whole deal, and medicine, of course. And we'll compress everybody into open air concentration camps if we've allowed them to live. We'll call them 15-minute cities. And we'll tell people that they have no choice because treaties with the United Nations require it. And we'll dissolve nation states because no nation can solve the problems. They're just too big, the global problems. And we'll take over. Read Pact for the Future. It's available on the internet for you to read. Version 2.0, they're expecting to adopt the final version in September, which is pretty close. But there is mercy in the universe. Two members of the United States Congress, not a body that ordinarily works really hard to do very deeply good things for its people or for the world, but in this case, two members of the United States Congress got together. One is Mike Lee of the US Senate, with whom I disagree on almost everything else that he says and does. And the other is Chip Roy of the House of Representatives, with whom I disagree with almost everything he says and does. But hey, I'll take what I can get. Okay. So these two guys got together and they each introduced a bill into one of the two houses of Congress. Now, there have been bills before, but to get out of the United Nations, but they've always been bills in the House by people like Ron Paul and Representative Massey, and they went precisely nowhere. Nobody paid any attention to them. Don't be ridiculous. How could we get out of the United Nations? You fool. Okay. Well, this time, what's different is that there is a bill before the Congress of the United States called the Disengaging Entirely from the United Nations Debacle Act of 2023. Ooh, let me say those words again. They're very nice words. They make your heart happy. The Disengaging Entirely from the United Nations Debacle Act of 2023. And that act was not expected to be passed even by the woman who wrote it, with whom I've met. Very nice legislative aide. It was a piece of window dressing. Except if we can get enough pressure mounted on the members of Congress of the United States so that they are afraid of losing control of the control that they've been put in place to maintain. That's why they're there. They're not public servants. They're not, I mean, they've been selected. They haven't been elected because we have machines that are programmed from a distance and blah, 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 blah. It's not, and it's a uniparty theatrical production, the whole election thing anyway, as is yours in Canada. But if we can prevail upon them with enough massive demand, they will have no choice but to pass this bill to override the veto with a 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate and get us the hell out of the United Nations. Well, what happens then? Oh, who cares? I'm in Canada. That doesn't really matter to me. Oh, yes, it does. The entire United Nations machine, the death machine, is a United States activity. It was created by the oligarchs and controllers in the United States and in the United States United States dominated economic system. And all of the mechanisms and all of the machinations are in fact expressions of U.S. hegemony and unfortunately control death oriented mechanism for total dictatorship. Yeah, but you've got a constitution that says you've got inalienable rights. Yeah, but that's not where the controller's loyalty lies. Remember that these monsters these psychopaths have no loyalty to any country, to any movement, to any religion, to any organization, to any structure. They have loyalty only to their own perceived needs. And they don't give a damn about the US Constitution. I do. I like it a lot. They do not, nor do they care about Canada or the Canadian well-being of the people, because the people are less than cockroaches to these monsters. We want to thrive and survive. We want each other's children and families and neighborhoods and religions to live in peace and harmony because we're decent people. These creatures, these monsters, they're human, but they are not working on the same objective. Their objective, and it's well articulated explicitly in their documentation, they want us dead. And they want those few of us who are not dead at their service in a subservient, subhuman, transhumanized, bio-digitally converged sub-humanity that can never raise a question, that can never do a Spartacus revolt, that can never challenge their total hegemony, and that exists only to serve them in a variety of ways, including by mining with our own bodies endless amounts of cryptocurrency for them as our enzyme processes are carried out in each of our cells and between them. So what we're talking about is what every tyrant throughout history has ever dreamed of. This is the wet dream of every tyrant who ever lived. But these are the first people who have the science, who have the money, who have the organization, who have the vision and the propaganda to get what they want if we let them. So it is critically important to you and to me and to the people in Sri Lanka. I was up at 4:30 in the morning yesterday preparing for a meeting starting at 5:30 in the morning with the people in Sri Lanka about this. It is critically important to, that sucks, by the way. Nobody should have to be talking intelligently at 5:30 in the morning. But never mind, that's a different story. I was happy to be doing it. The point is that when the United States is plucked out of the UN death machine, which this bill can do, what happens is likely to be that they allow the death machine to collapse because the heart and soul of this machine is the United States' participation. And when that is removed, the profoundly integrated leadership is removed, and they have to figure out what to do next. Oh shit, let's figure out how to come back again, and we'll make up something else and try it again. That's what happened when the League of Nations was collapsed intentionally by the globalists when the United States refused to join. Yes, we have the BRICS alliance, we have the challenge to the petrodollar, but that's all organized by these same forces for the same purpose, which is total global hegemony, with the United States at the core of this. So it behooves every Canadian, every Australian, every Vanuatuan to tell everybody that they know in the United States to make sure that this bill passes. May I share, maybe somebody else can share the screen. If you will go to preventgenocide2030.org and share the screen, I will show you what I'm talking about. And I hope I have convinced you so far that this pertains to you regardless of your place of residence. The death machine is truly international, and they are very, very close to springing the trap. There we are. PreventGenocide2030.org. If you click the accept and scroll down a bit, you'll see we have, we need the graphic.
Thank you, Esther.
We have, thank you. We have created, and there are two people here on this meeting who have been absolutely critically central to creating this. We have a group, a working group that's international that meets on pretty much a daily basis to try to make this happen. We have created the 10 Million Patriot Challenge, and we are asking, do you have the balls? The naked truth is riding the wrecking ball of truth to destroy the United Nations. Do you have the balls? We're asking people. We need 10 million people to pick up their freedom mouse and ride it. Scroll down a bit. This is an international set of actions. Some of the steps are only for people in the United States. The Congress of the United States will not accept a letter, an action letter like the one that we have here, unless it comes from the US Postal Code. So if you scroll down just a little bit, there's a blue button at the bottom, and you can click on that. Don't click on it right now. I don't want to spend the time. You can click on it, fill in your name, your address, your postal code, tell everybody you know in the United States they need to do this, and then you can send a letter to Congress. You get the phone numbers, you can call them, leave a message, speak to the staff. You can make a 30-second video, and you can send a tweet to your representative. It sorts it based on your note. But what about the president? Wait, go back up a little bit. Go back. What about the presidential election? We have this big uniparty party called, no, go back down to step number 2. Sorry. There we are. Challenge number 2. We have set up a program where you can tweet the people who are running for president of the United States. God help us all it's a really distressing lineup, but you can tweet these people, and on their official Twitter accounts or X accounts, you ask them this: you want my vote? I want your answers. And the questions in the tweet are: do you commit to withdraw from the UN and WHO if you're elected? Do you commit to reestablish the right of informed consent, bodily autonomy, including around vaccines? And do you commit to punish all, quote, pandemic crimes against humanity? Yes or no? Now, the purpose of this is not really because Donald Trump or Kamala Harris are going to read their Twitter and make a choice. The purpose of this is to force this information into the presidential conversations. It's nowhere right now. Then we're asking people who live in the United States, we'll get out of the United States in a moment to the global community. We're asking people who live in the United States to download these talking points, set up appointments. No, Robert F. Kennedy will not. As a matter of fact, his statements are quite different from his would-be presentation, but that's to be talked about in a moment. Anyway, there's a talking point one pager that people can take with them to their meetings, electronic or in person, with their elected representatives, because their elected representatives, their members of Congress, do not know. Let's go down a little bit. Do not know what is in step number 5, that every one of the treaties with the United Nations, and indeed the very relationship of the country, US, Canada, any other country, to the United Nations is based on a fraud. And the members of the US Congress need to know this, because if they do not act to get the United States out of the United Nations by passing these 2 acts, one in Congress, one in the Senate, one in the House, then they are participants in a fraud against the Constitution, their oaths of office, and against the people of the United States, which our legal counsel tells us may very well rise to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors or treason. Oops. This is an extra added incentive to do what we're telling them to do, which is get us out of this death machine. Step number 4, which is to the left of that, says motivate your circle of influence to take the challenge, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in the United States, wherever you are. You need to alert people to these realities. If you are in the United States, or if you have people that you know in the United States, then it is especially important to motivate them to become part of the 10 million Patriot Challenge. Why 10 million? Because it will take approximately that number of people demanding that we get out of the United Nations to force the Congress to pivot its policy and pass this bill and sustain it over the veto. And then there's an international step, step number 6, the international disengaging from the United Nations Declaration. There's a button that you can go to at the bottom. The international declaration needs to be signed by people around the world. This will be presented to the Congress of the United States in support of the many people demanding that they pivot and get us out. Now, people say, well, the members of Congress are not going to change what they feel. I don't care what they feel. I don't care what they think. Until proven otherwise, every member of the governing body is corrupt and controlled. I care what they do. And I have had the personal experience, for example, in 2009, when the United States was about to impose a mandated vaccination program with a sterilizant on which it holds the patents, forcing that into the arms of every man, woman, and child in the United States under the guise of protecting us from swine flu. We found out about the sterilizant. We found out about the patents. We told people about it. And in 2009, in 11 days, 3.5 million people sent letters to the Congress and the president and head of the FDA and so on, saying, don't you dare. I am not doing this. And on day 12, the head of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius, announced that they were dropping the program. 3.5 million people said, "Don't you dare." And the United States government did not dare. We have that power, but we only have that power when we use it, when we exert it. If we convince ourselves that we have no power and that nothing we do makes a difference, we are working for their success. Scroll down a little bit more. We have talked with lots of people. And so we have a section on Prevent Genocide 2030 where we have lots and lots of interviews. And Doug Porter is the wonderful person who makes all this happen, who mounts these, who finds them, who puts them up. Connie Shields is also very much involved with this. So there's a lot of information here. There's also information deeper into the site. We put up the United Nations own documents so you can read the profound craziness and evil that we're talking about, because a lot of people still think that these institutions are really okay. If we could just make them better, we can stick around and stay inside the organizations and just sort of reform them. But they are death machines. They were created to be death machines. And I have talked about the foundational documents and the direction that these organizations were created in order to follow, and how they have always been committed to eugenics and enslavement. You can take this off. You can stop sharing. That website is preventgenocide2030.org.
This is amazing. You are a firecracker. We are so loving your energy.
Okay, and thank you.
Yeah, we just have about 30 minutes or so, and I know that a lot of our members have a lot of questions for you. So
Good.
if everyone who has a question for Dr. Rima, please raise your hand. And while we're waiting for people to raise their hand, I just have a question for you. So I see that you do have quite a few countries listed on your website. What are the results that you're experiencing in regards to the petitions?
Well, for instance, Doug Porter created a parliamentary petition for Canada, and 90 some thousand, he can tell you the exact number, 90 some thousand people signed on to the parliamentary petition on the official site. Interestingly, at the same time, there was a petition to get rid of Justin Trudeau, and that got over 400,000 signatures, as if changing one sock puppet for another was going to make any difference. It won't. You're dealing with a uniparty. You have to do something a little more profound than that. But anyway, Leslyn Lewis was the parliamentary supporter, and instead of presenting it in Parliament so that it could be debated and could become part of the official record, she buried it under a stack of other papers, and it never saw the light of day, which is a piece of treachery that one might want to consider. So that wasn't enough. It was good, but it wasn't enough. What you need is massive uproar. My favorite law firm, which has offices in every country in the world, is Hubbub and Uproar. And once Hubbub and Uproar is properly supported by peaceful actions of the people, Pierre Poilievre, is he a better alternative to Trudeau? No. He is a globalist, and he claims not to know what the pandemic treaty was about, and so on. That's nonsense. So that's all part of the uniparty theater, which is very effective because it keeps people distracted and focused on, what the magician wants you to see. Look over here while they're screwing
Absolutely.
the world here.
Yes, so true. They're great at their distractions, and as long as people believe they need a master, the game is going to continue. DK, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Rima, thank you for everything you're doing. I try to somewhat follow you. I have so much content to look at, but I think I remember first seeing you on Christopher James
Mhm.
interview. One question I have is, God forbid if this doesn't happen, these two acts don't pass in the House and the Senate, what would you say we can do to, whether it passes or not, actually, what would you say that sovereign or aspiring sovereign people can do to minimize their exposure or completely get out of the UN? Can an individual?
Individual people cannot get out of the United Nations. There are a lot of people who say, well, I'm going to go off grid and I'm going to have a lovely area and we'll have a farm and we'll have a community and we'll all barter and that'll be wonderful. And they'll never find us. Do you not think they have heat-seeking drones? All of those activities are made illegal under the land grab, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People land grab. All of those activities are made illegal under the rewilding programs in which slugs and snails and scorpions have more rights than people, and there are more of them. So you have to live in an urban concentration camp, and you never will set foot in on the land again. The plan, by the way, under Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 is for the remaining 10% of the world's population to be compressed onto 1% of the world's land mass. So you're, off and doing your own sovereign and off the grid thing. And the stormtroopers come and they either kill you or they take you to the urban concentration camp. There literally is no hiding place. There is only an exit door or no door. And so it is incumbent. You hear my passion. Yeah, I'm generally passionate, but I'm fighting for the existence of humanity. Your children have been sexualized through Soji 123, not just to normalize pedophilia. Your children have been sexualized because it's the most effective way of making sure that their psychosexual development is stunted and that they become compliant, docile, easily led, and easily misled people. It's the technology and the technique that was developed through programs like MK Ultra and now has been generalized into the schools of every country in the world. Why is that so important? To make docile slaves of every child who's allowed to survive. The only way out is out. And if it means having gatherings on street corners and handing out flyers and talking to the people on your block and organizing peaceful, do not go kinetic. If we go kinetic, they have weapons that they will be quite happy to use to destroy us in ways that we never dreamed of. It is incredibly important for us to not say, oh, well, I guess it'll be okay. It's too big for me. Either you and you and you and you and I are working against the success of this hegemony, or we are voting for it. There is no longer an intermediate position. There is no neutrality here. And individual resistance doesn't work because they've organized collective calamity for us. Your neighbors have to be out of this in the same way that you do, or nobody's out of it.
So true, Rima. Have you heard of Maggie Braun? She's a Canadian.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she
Meg,
started Kickoff.
she's wonderful. And she's working at a very, very important level, which is unwinding the municipal control, which is not just true in Canada. By the way, every municipality in every country in the world has been captured. Think about that. About how brilliant that is to imagine that you could do that and then implement that. Done that in every country in the world. So extracting communities is part of the essential community resistance. Maggie, who's been on our Catalytic Conversations podcast, which is really quite a lot of fun. We have really interesting roundtables. Connie Shields is one of my co-hosts on that amazing program. Maggie is marvelous and she needs lots of support. We have to have activism at the local level and at every level on the way up, but most importantly, at the local level and at the geopolitical level. If we leave out one or the other, we can't get out.
Thank you. Yeah, I just interviewed Maggie a couple weeks ago. She's brilliant. Hella, go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Rima. Thank you so much for your passion and information regarding education and our children of the world. I agree with you that there's no point to amend any systems. How do you see the future of the New Earth education?
First of all, there is no reasonable future if we don't get out from under the control of the death machine. And by the way, Rockefeller very, very carefully with his buddies took over the entire educational system, first of the United States and then of the world, set up the schools of pedagogy at the University of Chicago and Columbia University and so on, to train teachers to not teach, to train, he supported John Dewey to tell us that feelings were more important than facts, and so on and so on. Well, if we have people who cannot think, if we have people who cannot reason, if we have people who believe that whether 2 + 2 = 4 is a matter of consensus belief, then we have perfect slaves who have no idea that they're slaves. And if their genes are altered by the gene altering technology, then they are indeed perfect slaves who are owned by the slave owners. It is critically important for people to take their children out of the government schools or out of private schools that follow the government schools dictates, and teach their children what reality is, what math is, what history is, what truth is, what compassion is, and teach them that being different is a mark of honor, not a mark of disfavor by the ruling mob. In other words, cultural Marxism and real education don't go together. And what we're dealing with is the destruction of society by cultural Marxism, so largely writ that Mao never imagined it, Stalin never imagined it. And by the way, cultural Marxism. Did you know, you probably already know, that John D. Rockefeller Sr. bought the Marxist Cultural Revolution? He funded it. Jacob Rothschild funded Mao's revolution. The other great revolutions of the last couple of centuries were all funded by the great capitalists. Why? These guys bought what they wanted. They didn't have to fund these anti-capitalist revolutions. What they were funding for was the ability to manifest this level of control, population control, through every society in the world. And they supported these experiments, if you will. Well, we have an experiment coming. Once we get rid of the monsters, once we get out from under the death machine, and if we don't, we're doomed. So let's assume that we do, and let's do it. Once we do that, then the hard work begins. Then we put society back together again, and we figure out what we want and what we don't want. And there will be experiments, and some of those experiments will go better than others. And there will be diversity, and there will be real diversity, by the way, not this nonsense. And some countries will do better than other countries in figuring it out. And there will be alliances. Remember alliances? We didn't need a global organization to tell us what peace is. And oh, by the way, if you read the Charter of the United Nations, which is a good thing to do, you will find that it is not a peace document. It's a war document. There is no provision for peace in it. In the same way that in the Constitution of the World Health Organization, there is no provision for health. It is a disease and control organization with a disease and control document regulating it, an illegal one, by the way, in terms of the laws of our countries. So the answer is we have no choice. If humanity is to survive, we have no choice but to find out how to put society back together again.
So, Dr. Rima, I'm a co-founder of the New Earth Network, and what we think of education is actually going back to community-based education with homeschoolers creating learning pods. So that's a grassroots, bottom, not even up, just community-based education where the parents are in charge, the community is involved, elders are invited. So it's kind of going back to indigenous models and integrating, of course, technology and everything that we have in each community. And each one is going to be different. It's not a cookie cutter. It's going to be whatever the community creates. So is that something of a vision for
I think
creating?
that would be fantastic. And I'm smiling. My son will be 50 years old this October. When he was a little boy and computers were Atari 28-bit computers, I set up a network of prodigiously gifted children around the United States and Canada who could talk to each other, who could learn together, who could come together. For instance, if they wanted to study Egyptology, they would go to the Field Institute in Chicago and work together for a week and play together and then go back to their homes and so on. So I was in to serve the needs of the prodigiously gifted children. I was in the process of creating that model. It it makes sense. My first husband was a biochemist, and one of the things that I learned from him, in addition to the fact that I didn't want to be married to him, was the concept that the answer has to make sense. If the answer makes sense, you'll come to it in the New Education Network. I'll come to it through prodigious children education, and other people will come to it in other ways. The answer makes sense. Let us experiment. Let us find out how to do human in the best way possible, not how to do slave in the worst way possible.
Thank you, Rima. Thank you, Hella. Great question. Jane, go ahead.
I want to thank you for having Dr. Rima on. I have been looking at your work and getting your newsletters for quite a few years, and you give me inspiration. So thank you for hosting this as well. Life Force Canada is I'm so wonderful to be able to be introduced to this whole group. I had just a couple of questions. My first introduction to population came in 1992, and I actually had a neighbor on Salt Spring who we were talking and walking and opened a door and handed me some papers and said, I just got back from Rio doing an international presentation. And I remember he said, I got extras, you can have this. And I remember looking at it later and going, what a boring thing. It's all on stats. Well, I'll bump it up to 2020. In 2020, I was moving and I found the same file in the back of my file cabinet, and suddenly I wasn't the same woman. And I understood perfectly. This man was from Calgary, U of C. I understood exactly what this paper was and who he presented it to. So with that, it just added more to my knowledge and everything you've been saying, Dr. Rima. Here, I'm getting, it seems like everything's very pointedly in front of, they just come right out and there's no hiding it. So there's a website called NanaimoDoYouKnow.com, and I just put the link up. And their O, for those many of you on here know this probably, but their O is the UN logo. It's just like right in your face. There is quite a few people who are aware and are working hard on this, and so any guidelines and anything else that people can share is certainly welcome. One quick question: with a background and education and experience as a psychiatrist, it's what I'm facing is I'm with family, friends, and as many of us are, is the psyop, the masterly of the psyop with people we love and just in general. So thank you.
You're welcome. Let me tell you a quick story. This son that I mentioned, the only one that I've got, who may well be my ex-son, it's hard to tell, um, decided to come. I live in Tucson, and he decided to come to Tucson for my 80th birthday. Not sure why a birthday divisible by 10 is more important than one that's not, but okay. And we had been estranged for many years. There had been no communication, and suddenly he wants to come and celebrate my birthday. And I said, okay, having no idea what that meant. So he and his wife arrived and spent a week avoiding me. And on the last day, the last night, I said, look, I want to have breakfast with you before you head off 2 days early on your trip. Okay. Um, just you, not your wife. And that was not acceptable. But I said, well, that's what we're going to do. So we had breakfast at a restaurant. And I said, so what is it you want? Now, remember, there's years of estrangement here, no communication. I said, so what is it that you want, in this relationship? He said, I want to have a relationship with you. I said, why? He said, I respect you. I said, why do you respect me? And he said, well, it is true that I believe that you are a public health hazard and you are responsible for the deaths of tens, possibly hundreds of millions of people. I said, so you think your mother is Joseph Mengele? And he said, basically, yes. And I said, so why do you want to have a relationship with? Why would you respect me? I wouldn't respect somebody I thought of like that. And he said, well, you're misguided, but you're sincere. I said, how do you know I'm misguided? Have you read any of the things that I've published and referred to and so on? He said, yes, yes, which of course is nonsense. Of course he hasn't. And I said, well, I don't exactly see what this relationship is. My son is shot up and boosted to the max because he can't possibly comprehend that anything that I've said about the jabs and the bioweapons would be true. So I understand firsthand what that disconnect can be like. And it's excruciating. But here's the deal, it's designed to be excruciating. It's designed to separate us one from another. It's designed to make us unable to feel for each other, unable to hear each other, unable to comprehend each other, and unable to care about each other. Look what has happened to the tenor of politics. Look what has happened to the tenor of family relations. Look what has happened to the tenor of community relations. If you think that this is any less intentional on the part of the globalist would-be masters than the conflict between Israel and Gaza and Russia and the Ukraine, then you're not looking at the facts clearly. This is part of the psyop. The more we distrust each other, the more we are controllable. The more we hate each other and kill each other, the less work there is for the depopulationist masters, would-be masters. So yeah, this is the way we're supposed to feel about one another, to which my response is no, I will not.
Beautiful, Rima. Thank you. And thank you, Jane, for being here. Appreciate you. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I imagine that you are familiar with the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I was curious, what is your perspective on those covenants, as they're closely related to the UN?
They certainly are. Well, let's start for a moment with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Rights, it's a beautiful term, isn't it? Universal Declaration, human rights. When you read it closely, it's exactly the opposite. And one of I mean, I'm from the US, and in the US, our Bill of Rights and our Declaration does not grant any rights at all. It identifies rights that everybody, including Canadians, come equipped with in the same way that you come equipped with, appendages. You also come equipped with inalienable rights. And it happens that our foundational documents just identify those. if you read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you find that rights are given by the United Nations, and they can be removed by the passage of a law. And then if you read the last article of the Universal Declaration of Human, who said I was young? If you read the last article, it says that everything that happens has to be done in harmony with the purposes and programs of the United Nations. Well, that's not exactly the government serving the people, is it? That's the people serving the government. The conventions that you speak about are equally Aesopian. Aesopian language is inverted language. Everything that says white is really black. Everything that says up is really down. Everything that these documents proclaim is in fact the opposite of what they are meant to appear to proclaim. So yeah, I'm familiar with them, and I've written extensively about the contents of these and other documents. The very word sustainability, the Sustainable Development Goals are about the destructive dissolution goals. And we could go on and on about that. There was a question about something that I missed that just flipped by, but I'll wait for. So it says, should we bother trying to become private citizens? Are you training others to take over for you should anything ever happen? Because we will always need someone with your knowledge. Everyone is welcome to know everything I know and to choose which parts of the battles they choose to take up. I don't know anything more than anybody else knows. I just have less social judgment than many people, so I keep doing this. My husband was assassinated for this work. There have been 9 so far unsuccessful assassination attempts on my life. They're clearly not real good at this. I'm not the only person in danger. You're all in danger because they want you dead. So anybody is welcome to join me in what I do or do what you do, and I'll join you.
Thank you, Rima. Paula, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Nice to meet you, Rima. I'm from the States. I'm actually from Chicago. I appreciate what you just said about your son. I had gotten off a weekend of texts with 3 of my siblings. I have 8 living siblings now, and I'm the only one that sees this. The rest of them are on the other side and deny and go against everything I'm saying. So I can see the division there because I'm feeling it in my heart very deeply. But so getting back to me being from Chicago, every time I write my reps who are Durkin and Duckworth, I get the same old response from them. Thank you. Thank you for your, concern, but what else is it that, because I will share this with my many groups here in the, Chicagoland area, but what else is there that we can do? Because the reps, Chicago is so far gone.
It's not in good shape. Thanks to such patriots as Lori Lightfoot, but that's another discussion. Let's talk about what happens when you send a letter to the alleged public servants whom you are paying abundantly, but others are paying more abundantly, your elected representatives. It doesn't matter what the letter says. It really doesn't make any difference what kind of balsamic nonsense. Thank you very much for expressing your concerns. I will take this into account. That's nonsense. It's all boilerplate and means nothing. What means something is this. The lowest person on the totem pole in the office of the member of parliament or the member of Congress is assigned daily to count up what opinions are coming in emails, what opinions are coming in faxes, in phone calls, and they tally it. And then that goes to the subordinate who serves the chief of staff, and they keep track of that. And then that is presented to the chief of staff. When the chief of staff of the member of parliament or the member of Congress notices a trend that is disturbing. The chief of staff will go to the elected person or selected person and say, hey, boss, we got a problem. Last week, we had 416 letters on this particular topic. This week, we have 10,856. Next week, it's 152,412. Uh-oh, we've got a problem. And when that's it doesn't matter what the response has been that the autoresponder sent out to you, irrelevant. When there is enough pressure on the congressman or congresswoman or member of parliament so that their utility to the people who put them in power and keep them there and keep them controlled and also keep them supplied with whatever it is that they need, money, boys, drugs, whatever it is, when they're forced to deal with the fact that they're about to lose control of the control, they do. And it's at that point, let me tell you a story. 1994, United States Congress was planning on making an illegal substance out of every nutrient, every herb, every supplement that anybody could possibly lay their hands on. And the people of the United States said, my three favorite words, don't you dare. They came in busloads. They wrote letters. We didn't have the internet, so they couldn't send emails. More people wrote letters than wrote during the entire war in Vietnam. And they said, don't you dare. So the Congress of the United States, you know, the spineless, gutless, worthless Congress of the United States, which is the only one that we have, decided they couldn't do that. Uh-oh. And so through unanimous consent, not one single member of Congress standing up against it, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994 was passed. Unanimous consent. They said, okay, nutrient supplements, herbs, they're all foods, and nobody can tell you how many lettuces or how many lamb chops to eat. So you can take as much vitamin C or chromium or whatever you want as you want, and nobody's going to tell you different. That happened on the literally on the eve of the Congress of the United States making every nutrient and supplement illegal. And it happened only because the people of the United States said, don't you dare. Now, when the people of any country, and we did this in Chile too, I can tell you that story, when the people of a country say you are about to lose control of the control. And when you lose control of the control, you are no longer useful to those who control you. So listen up, buddy. You do what we say on this particular thing. Whatever legislature you're talking about will make a 180-degree pivot and do what you told them to do. And then they'll go back to being the creatures that they are. But you've gotten what you need. And we need together to get the United States, the heart of the beast, the evil heart in this case. The people of the United States are not any more evil than the people of Canada. But this part of the heart of the beast is deeply evil because it's controlled and it's been designed to accomplish this anti-human set of goals. And we have to kill that beast. And the way to do that is to pull the United States out. So I urge you, even though you're Canadians, most of you, you're not in the United States. You know people in the United States. You can put this out. You can help make this happen, because if it happens there, then it can happen in Canada. As you see, it's not happening in Canada unless it happens in the United States. When the United States leaves, other countries will be able to exit. Some will have to, like Israel, which can't survive in the United Nations without the covering wings of the United States. And some will leave because they want to, like Serbia and Vanuatu, which want to, but can't do it alone. Canada, why not?
Yes.
So this is what has to happen first.
Absolutely, Rima. Yay. Thank you so much. Just let you know, all of our members, we don't clap in the usual way. We do this instead. So this is everybody celebrating you
Thank
and
you.
sending lots
Thank
of
you so
love.
much. Thank you.
We're so grateful that you are, taking this path. And it's actually been mentioned here that we need to have you back on because you've gone down a few rabbit holes, and we would love to hear more information on that as well. We've been talking about this. We started Lifers Canada in 2020. So a lot of these conversations, we've had them over the years, but it was so great to have it here in 2024. Just as a reminder again, Rima, we so agree with everything you say. We here too, we have bullshit meters as well. And yeah, and we also do not call them the elites either. They're more like parasites. So thank you everyone for being here. We so appreciate all the action steps everyone is taking, no matter what you're doing, no matter how small it is. The action that you're taking is going to make a very big difference in this reality. So keep moving forward, everyone. We're here to support you. Together we rise.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Rima.
Thanks so much.
Yes, and thank you,
Thank you,
Elton.
thank you,
Thank you very
Rima.
much.
And
Good night.
I want to thank
Thank you.
Elton
Good night.
for making
Thank
this
you.
connection.
Yeah.
Thank you.